Hello. Something I've been thinking about is rolling dice in Alpha Strike. Because if you're a new player, you might be surprised that when you start playing Alpha Strike, your different playing partners might just suggest using different dice rolling methods that are quite different from what's written in the rulebook. And in this video, I wanted to take a look at the different possibilities and talk about what the good points and bad points and, all that sort of thing about those are. There's some math involved, and I think this topic is pretty interesting. So let's dive in. If you're totally new to Alpha Strike, let me just briefly explain how damage works in this game. Here we have a Kit Fox Prime, and every unit in Alpha Strike is going to have a damage value here. On short range, the Kit Fox Prime is going to be able to do 3 points of damage. On medium range, it's going to be 3, and on long range, it's going to be 2. So it's more powerful up close than on long range. Here we have a different example, a Warhawk Prime, which has 5 points of damage on every range, so it is quite a bit more powerful than the Kit Fox. For the purposes of this video, I'm just going to take the Kit Fox and use its 3 points of damage as a point of example here. So, as per the rules, how they are written, what you're supposed to do in Alpha Strike when you're trying to hit your enemy, you're going to throw 2d6, and if you hit, you're going to deliver all of your damage to your opponent or whatever unit you're shooting at. So, for example, if the Kit Fox Prime here was in medium range and wanted to, or would be able to hit the enemy on a 7 or more, I just rolled 2d6. I got an 8, so I did hit, and the enemy unit suffered 3 damage. Now, if I rolled, let's say, a 6, I would just whiff the attack completely, no damage at all. I don't know anyone who plays Alpha Strike using these rules. Personally, I know that there are some tournaments and stuff where everyone does play by the default rules, but I've never met anyone who wanted to play by these rules or who just does. It's quite interesting that no one plays the game as it's actually written. Now, how do people actually play the game then? Well, the rulebook itself has a couple of different methods of rolling the dice. One of them is called variable damage, where I guess the idea is to sort of simulate how when in BattleTech you're firing all of your weapons, you're not going to hit with absolutely everything. You might be able to do 50 damage, but actually you're only going to deliver, let's say, 35 or something. So that's what it sort of simulates. The idea is that you roll your to-hit dice, and then you roll 1d6 per each point of damage. For example, the Kit Fox Prime here on medium would roll 3 dice. And every die that is 3 or more is going to deliver 1 point of damage. So, for example, I rolled a 1, a 2, and a 6, so I only delivered 1 point of damage, the 6 here. And there's always a minimum of 1 point of damage, which is, if you hit, you do actually do some damage. Now, I've never heard anyone play the game like this. Never. And I don't really like it. I'll get into why I think that's the case, why I don't think it's very good a little bit later. In the rulebook, there is also the multiple attack rolls sort of method of rolling dice. In this style, you take a 2d6 per each damage point. For example, the Kit Fox Prime here has 3 damage on medium range. So I would take 3 pairs of 2d6, right? And you roll for each point individually. So I want to get the 7 or more. So I roll a 2. That's not going to hit. A 6, not going to hit. And a 9. So I did in fact deliver 1 point of damage. The rules say that you should throw them like this, like one after the other, but I've always played it so that you just roll all at once and then you check. So I got an 11 and a 5 and a 6. So again, I only did 1 point of damage. That's the third method. And the most common way of rolling dice in Alpha Strike I've ever seen is the death from above pilot die system. In this system, you throw one big die, or a pilot die as they call it, and then you throw 1d6 per damage inflicted, or like the damage value. And then you add the dice together, like if I roll a 3 here, so I have got a 5 and a 6 and an 8. Let's give it a go. Again, I want to get a 7. So I got a 4, I got an 8, I got an 8, and a 5. So this time I would deliver 2 points of damage on the enemy. So that's the most popular system I've seen thus far. So let's talk about numbers and the advantages and disadvantages these different methods of rolling dice actually have. Why would you want to choose one over the other? Why would you not want to choose the rules as written? There's a great article by Pile of Dice by this guy called Zach Belado. And he has actually done the research. He has tried all of these dice rolling systems and tried to see if they actually make a difference in playing the game. You should read the article for yourself, but what's very interesting to me is that the rules as written default way of playing the game actually results in just about the exact same numbers as the multiple to hit rolls, the third version I showed you. It's pretty interesting. I think it has to do with the fact that when you're rolling once and deliver all of your damage, you're either gonna miss or you're gonna hit, and it evens out, because when you're rolling multiple times for each point, you're going to hit more often, but then again you're going to do less damage. So I guess it's going to even out. There's this very nice graph where it shows that. I'm also not at all surprised that the version of rolling dice where you roll if you actually did some damage after you've hit actually results in less hits or less damage dealt. That doesn't surprise me in any way. I think it's a very weird inclusion in the rules. It's only going to make the game slower. What's really fascinating to me is the fact that the death from above pilot die system, where you roll one big die and then multiple smaller dice and add them together, actually again results in pretty much the exact same graph. So as you can see from this graph made by Zach here, all of the default and the multiple to hit and the DFA pilot die system are all in this long, or like the similar line here in the middle, and the one where you just reduce the amount of damage you actually inflict is the yellow line here. So in principle, most mechs are going to play sort of similarly regardless of how you roll the dice. They're going to do the same amount of damage over multitudes of games. So you could go with all of them. But here's something Zach didn't do that I did, because I wanted to try the numbers myself. I wanted to build a sort of a rough system for seeing if I also get the same numbers and how many critical hits I actually inflict using these different methods. Because in Alpha Strike, if you roll a natural 12, that's always going to be a critical hit in the game. And it doesn't take a genius to figure out that if you're only rolling once to hit, you're going to have fewer critical hits. So I created this system in Google Sheets where I simulate rolling 200 dice, or like 200 to hit rolls. And as you can see, I calculated it so that I've got different to hit modifiers there. You got 6 plus, 8 plus, 10 plus, and a 12 plus, because I want to get the criticals out as well. So you can see, for example, here I have the rules as written, 2d6 full damage. On 6 plus, I got 420 damage. And I got very similar values as Zach on his blog. the variable damage 2d6 per damage point, also 422 damage on 6+, and the DFA pilot die also just a bit over 420, rolling 200 times. The other values sort of line up as well. I thought it was very interesting. Of course, there's going to be luck involved, but I did get the same results as Zach did. But what Zach didn't do is check out how many critical hits it did. In Alpha Strike, a critical hit is always landed when you roll a 12, a natural 12. So it figures that if you roll once to hit, you're going to have fewer critical hits if you're rolling, compared to if you're rolling once per every damage point. And I also created a secondary sort of sheet where I calculated only the critical hits. And it is very clear. I rolled 10,000 rolls, and it came to the conclusion where the rules as written system only had around 5 or so critical hits per 200 rolls. And the 2d6 per damage point got almost 17 critical hits per 200 rolls. And the DFA pilot die system got around 12 critical hits per 200 rolls. The difference is staggering, and this is why it's interesting. Critical hits do actually change the game, and they make the game feel different. To me, I feel like the critical hits actually make the game feel like more like BattleTech, because you got a little bit more of that granularity where your different mechs are going to suffer different effects. You're probably going to get some criticals even in normal Alpha Strike, because when you get into the internals, you've stripped the armor, you get critical hits, but now you're just rolling a lot more of them. So you're going to have different mechs being able to move less or not being able to fire as well and stuff. So I think that brings a little bit of that granularity back. So let's talk about the good and bad parts of these different methods, and then you can think about which one you want to use in your Alpha Strike games. The good part about the rules as written Alpha Strike dice rolls is going to be speed, because you're only rolling once. It's very clear. You roll once, see if it hits, and then apply damage. That's it. It's very quick. In my opinion, the bad part is it feels kind of bad when you don't hit. Even if the numbers are the exact same in all of these three systems, this one still feels the worst, because it's very possible you just whiff with your big old, I don't know, maybe you got an Atlas that's going to do 6 damage on short range, and you're just going to miss with all of it at once because you only have that one chance. And it's going to feel bad. I started feeling bad because the one game I played with the rules as written dice rolling game a couple of days ago, my opponent had terrible luck with his heaviest firepower mechs. He was constantly missing, and I started feeling bad for him because it just didn't feel good. So I would say that's the problem with rolling only once. I have to say my favorite system thus far is this one, and it's because you get the most criticals out of it. It changes the game in a sort of a major way, because you're getting like almost 3 times as many criticals than you would by using this system. It just makes the game feel a little bit more detailed and granular and interesting, to me at least. It gives the fights more personality, to see different mechs with their legs blown off or whatever. I think just brings a little bit more interest into the game. The problem is, this is probably the most time-consuming way to play, because you're going to have to roll a lot of dice and find the pairs and stuff. So it might feel a little bit cumbersome, I guess. And also, if you have units with a lot of firepower, you're just going to need many pairs of dice to do it. Then we have the very popular Death from Above pilot die system, which is sort of a compromise between the two in terms of speed, because you're only rolling one big die and then adding the smaller die to it. So you're rolling a little bit quicker. It's easier to see sort of an overview of what you got. And you do also get a bit of an increase in criticals, of course, because if you roll a 6 on your pilot die, you have more chances to get 6s on your little dice. So that's very nice. It also brings back the sort of idea that in BattleTech, these are mechs firing with like 5 or 6 or 15 different weapons, and not all of them are going to hit. But also, it takes away the feels bad idea of just rolling a bad pair of dice and not hitting, because then you're going to have more opportunities to get good dice in your non-pilot dice. It doesn't remove it entirely. It doesn't remove the feels bad factor entirely, because you can always roll very bad pilot dice, and that's going to ruin your game and day. So that's my problem with the DFA system. But I am very, very okay with playing with it, because a lot of people like to use it, and I do understand where it's coming from. So, what do you think? Which system do you actually use in your games? Do you use a different system? I know there are some others. I even know that there are some people who just play using the 12 dice, which sounds insane to me, because it's going to be an entirely different game, because the values aren't going to add up. It's going to be, you're going to roll differently compared to 2d6. But, you know, I guess you could do it. If everyone's doing it, it's going to be fair to everyone, right? I don't know. Anyway, that's pretty much the video for this time. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.